I'm recording my homily for Epiphany Sunday, and it seems a little odd because I waited so long. We no longer have any of our decorations out, and I would have much preferred to have recorded this sitting next to our manger scene with the three magi there so that I could use them as kind of like show and tell, right? But I was lazy and I didn't get this homily recorded in time. I do have to say there's one little neat thing. So my camera that I use to record these homilies, it tends to want to focus on certain things. So usually it'll put a box around my head, because it's focusing on my face or something like that. But today it's a little different. If you notice the shadow on the wall of the cross, it keeps wanting to focus on that. It puts a little box around that. So it's cool. It's like the camera's evangelizing. It's saying, hey, I'm not going to focus on you. I'm going to focus on Jesus. So it's good. A little camera's teaching me a little humility there. Okay, so, growing up, again, my generation, but growing up, going to Mass, hearing the homilies, also just reflecting on my religion classes that I took in the Catholic school, nobody ever wanted to talk about one particular subject, and that was hell. They would never talk about hell. In the homilies, you'd never hear about it. They would never talk about Satan. It was almost like, it's off limits. We're just not going to talk about it. Jesus loves you. That's all you need, right? And so hell and Satan were just completely off limits. Now, I think there's two possible reasons for that. One is, in the past, we probably overdid it. We probably talked about hell and Satan way too much because in some ways it's easier to scare people into heaven, right? It's easier to get people to want to go to heaven because they don't want to go to the other place than it is to get them to fall in love with heaven. That's hard. It's hard to get people to want to be in love, to fall in love, and to build love so that it's strong. That's really hard to do. But to get people to be afraid, piece of cake, right? Now, some would say then the impulse of fear is the strongest impulse we have. No, it's just the easiest, okay? The strongest, by far, is love. Love can obliterate fear in a heartbeat, but it is harder, okay? So, I think we overdid it in the past. And then the pendulum, as it swings, right? So if we used Satan and hell too much to get people to run to heaven, the pendulum swings too far the other way, and then we just completely deny he even exists, right? We don't even talk about him. It's just, and so it's good that we talk about heaven and Jesus loves us and those things. But Satan is like a hunter. And a hunter wants to convince his prey that he does not exist, right? That's why hunters wear camouflage and do all those things. They want to hide. And so if Satan can convince people to think he doesn't exist, then he can work unobstructed, okay? So, one of the consequences also of never talking about Satan, never talking about hell, is I think there are a certain number of people, Catholics included, who believe that he doesn't really exist. Now, all you have to do to believe that he exists is go into a place where God is really not cherished and loved, and you will very quickly see Satan working, okay? There's a spiritual reality to what he's doing, especially when he has free reign. Okay. Now, the other reason I think that maybe we don't talk about Satan and hell and all those things is because we are afraid. We're afraid if we talk about him that somehow he'll have power over us, right? So the story, the Harry Potter story, there's this character, Voldemort, who is like the Satan character. He has all this power and everybody's deathly afraid of him. And they're so afraid that they will not even use his name. What is the term they use? I don't even remember it, but it's he who is to not be named or something like that, whatever it is. But they will not say his name because they're so afraid, they're deathly afraid. And if anybody says Voldemort, they all cower in fear, right? I think on some level we are the same way. Now, yes, Satan is real, but by golly, we better not give him more power than he deserves. Don't make him more than he is. There is no reason for us to be afraid of him. The only power he has is when we are living in fear, right? Okay. Now, why do I bring Satan up on the Epiphany? Because I want to create a dynamic where you look at the Magi and we see one example, and then we can see in Satan the opposite example. So we just develop a more holistic understanding of what the Magi did and what they symbolized, if you will, to the world. This is one of the feast days where we refer to Jesus as a light to the nations. These Magi are coming from afar, right? They're coming from afar. They represent the world outside of the chosen people, outside of the Jewish world, who are going to come to Jesus and receive him and embrace him. It's beautiful. And so we're just going to develop that even more. Now, okay, let's talk about the Magi. So, how many Magi were there? Again, this is why I would love to have my little statues, but I don't have them. So we'll just have to imagine. How many Magi were there? Now, we often say 3, right? We often show 3 Magi. In the Hispanic culture, there's a tradition that there was actually a 4th Magi. I don't know all the story of that, but there's some traditions there, okay? But how many? Well, the scriptures don't actually say. It never says how many Magi there were. But what it does say is that there were 3 gifts offered, right? The gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, traditionally, because of that, we've imagined that there were 3 Magi. Now that we know there were more than one, because they speak of them as plural, but we don't know how many. So the first thing I want to focus on is the fact that whether there were 3 or more than just 2 or 2, however many there was more than one. They came as a team. They came together. They didn't come one at a time, just each discerning their own vision of the stars. They came as a team. This is important because if we get caught alone, we are far more vulnerable to Satan. And the vulnerability comes in the form of doubts, right? One of those Magi could have been off in his homeland, discerning the prophecies, discerning the star, discerning all those things, but then said, you know what? No, I'm just crazy, It's all just in my mind. This couldn't be true. So when we're alone, we're stuck. We're enslaved to our own thoughts. But when we're a team, we bounce those ideas off each other, and we grow and we become also stronger in our convictions. A phrase I often use is, you will never find one saint in isolation. Where you find one saint, you will always find another saint, okay? And so the teamwork of the Magi is important. Without that teamwork, they're alone, and they probably would not have had the conviction to do what they did. Okay, so that's the first thing, the fact that there's multiple Magi. Now, where did they come from? Did they come from the other side of Jerusalem? The other side of the city? Did they come from Nazareth? No, they came from the east. Now, the east, traditionally in scriptures, the east represents something good, right? Okay. In the east, in the far east, you have the traditional location of the Garden of Eden. Okay. You have the origins of Abraham and the people of Abraham. That's where they came from. But between that and the Holy Land, Jerusalem and Bethlehem, you have a very vast desert that needs to be crossed. So they came across that desert. And they journeyed through. Now that desert's important, and I'll get back to that. Now the east, so they come from the east. So they come from far away. So they're not locals. They're emigrating. They're immigrating. They're looking for something that is very, very distant. So they have great courage to be able to do that, right? It takes a lot of courage to be able to travel to another country to be able to follow God. Say, I want to follow God, and I'm even going to step way out of my comfort zone to do it. So that's what the Magi did. Now let's talk a little bit more about the Magi. What does the word Magi even mean? Well, if you get to its origins, to its root, it's implying magicians, right? In Hispanic, the words the magos is just magicians. Now, if we think that these were three men who are like wandering from circus to circus doing magic tricks, that would really be an error. These are not tricksters, right? These are not illusionists who go around entertaining people in Reno and Las Vegas. That's not them, okay? So what were they? I think it would be good to think of them more in what we know of them. One is they're going to be able to discern prophecies, nature, and so they're going to be very well educated in the sciences, astronomy, the sciences, but also in religion. There would have been many different religions, interpretations of religions, even astrology, all those things. They would have been very well educated in all of those things. Now, people who tend to be well educated tend to come from families that are very wealthy. Very wealthy families, what do? They want to make sure their kids get the best education they can possibly get. In the United States, the wealthy families, what they send their kids across to Europe, right? They send them to the best possible universities they can find, or to some Ivy League school, but they want them to have the best. And so I think these wise men, these kings, these magi, they would have fallen into that category. We know that they were wealthy based on the gifts that they're giving, based on their comportment, based on their interaction with King Herod, and how quickly he responds or reacts, if you will, to their presence. They would have been people who moved by their presence. They moved people by their presence, right? So they would have been upper class, wealthy, very well educated, and coming from another land. So that would have been very impressive, okay? All right, so in that sense, we could see them as kings, I would think, okay? We could also see them as just very wise men, wise and affluent men. Okay, all right. Now, let's keep moving on. Now, these wise men bring gifts to Jesus. What are the three gifts? Let's go into the gifts, and I want you just to be taking all this in because we're going to bring it all to a conclusion, okay? The three gifts. Well, we have the gold. The gold is given. Now, when a king gives gold, who does he give gold to? Does he give gold to his people? Probably not, right? A king ordinarily would give gold to another king, especially to a king who may be up on a higher level, to a king that he respects, that he has admiration for, or to a kingdom that is larger than his own, but it's looking up with great admiration. And so to have a king who's an adult doing that to a baby who's unproven, right? Unproven in the sense, where are they? They're in a stable. Jesus, Mary, Joseph, they've got nothing, right? And yet, they understand from the prophecies, from the star, from all these things, that they are in the presence of something even greater than themselves. So in the gold implies a profound humility. This king is not just giving pocket change. He's not just giving trinkets. He's giving a piece of himself. He's giving something that represents his entire life, his fortune, his livelihood, everything. And he's giving it in a very, very humble manner to one he looks up to. Very profound, right? You can imagine this king, he didn't just walk over to his camel and pull out of the saddlebag, oh yeah, that looks about enough. He didn't do that. This is the imagery as him giving all. Now, did he give everything he owned? No, but the symbolism of it. And so you think about yourself, you may not have lots of gold, but you have a house, you have things, you have a car, you have possessions, and you don't have to go and give them away, but to use them for the sake of the child king, right? So in our own lives, to use what we have for the sake of the one whom we love and adore. I think that's the symbolism of the gold. Now, the gold we can also take in terms of the Mass, right? When do we use gold at Mass? Well, traditionally speaking, we use it for the vessels, right? The vessels that at the beginning of the Mass hold bread and wine, by the consecration, by the Eucharistic prayer, they hold the body and blood of the same baby King, right? They hold the body and blood of Jesus Christ. And so we use gold-plated vessels, because it is a sign of our gift in that sense, the gift of ourselves and the gift of Him, and our admiration for Him, that we give the best. Gold, even to today, is considered, if you will, some of the best that we can give if we have it. Okay? So that's important. This is to see the connection. Now, I always love, you have three magi often depicted bringing gifts, right? At Mass, we often have three people coming up with the gifts. One has the wine, one has the bread, and one has the money, right? The gold, if you will, modern day gold. And they bring it forward to be offered to the King. Okay? Kind of cool. Is that everything I wanted to say about gold? Gold. I think so. Okay. Let's keep moving on. Now, one little example. So the gold also, I don't think of it just as a material gift. Don't think of it just as the guy wrote a check. You know, even if he gave everything, it's not just the material thing, right? My dad, in his dresser drawer, I always remember this, his bottom drawer was simply full, just full of all the letters, the cards that we as kids had given him through the years for Father's Day, for Valentine's Day, for Christmas. And he would just put all those cards in there. And every once in a while, you know, we'd sneak into their room and we'd just look through the cards and we would laugh, and because we would remember back when we gave him, but he would keep them. I remember one card, I don't remember if it was me or one of my siblings gave it to him, but we misspelled the last name. We couldn't even spell our own last name right. Anyways. But they were very precious to my dad. And so those were, in a sense, treasure that he had received. And real treasure. I mean, okay. When I would serve Mass as an altar server growing up, there was the priest, he would give us a silver coin when we served Mass on Christmas. Silver dollar, right? So he'd give us a silver dollar. I don't think they make them anymore. I don't think they made them for a long time. How much is it worth? It's worth $1. It's worth 100 pennies. But I would keep them because they were meaningful to me. And down through the years, I ended up only keeping one, but I would keep this one. And, you know, it's like, why did I keep it? I don't really know, other than it was meaningful that the priest had given me this silver dollar for serving Mass on Christmas, okay? So I grow up, we move away, right? I end up going through the seminary, I end up being ordained a priest, and I still had this silver dollar. So I'm getting ready to go back to my original parish to celebrate a Thanksgiving Mass as a priest. And that pastor is still there. He was there for, like 30 years or 35 years or something. So I ended up going back, and my plan was, I'm going to bring the silver dollar, and I'm going to hand it back to him. And I'm going to say, thank you. Thank you very much. And then when I was on the plane heading down, I realized I had forgotten it. Okay. Anyways, it was a nice thought. But there was more value to it than just the monetary value. I think that's true of the gold, and it's true of our things and how we use them. Okay. All right. Let's keep moving. So the second gift is incense, right? Frankincense, incense. Now, gold in some way symbolizes kingship. It's one king to another king. Incense symbolizes something different. It symbolizes divinity. When do we use incense? Well, when do we use incense at Mass, right? We use incense when we incense the altar. In fact, we incense the altar twice during Mass. Where it is the center. It is where the main action is going to happen, where the bread and wine become the body and blood of Jesus Christ in the gold, right? And so the incense symbolizes the presence of God in a very particular and special way. We use incense when we're reading the gospel. The presence of Jesus Christ in the scriptures, the presence of God in the scriptures, right? We incense the priest as well, not because the priest is such a great guy, but because the priest, Jesus Christ, is present. Jesus Christ is present doing the action, right? We are there participating in it with our King. And so the priest, we incense the priest in that symbolism. Not symbolism, that's the wrong word. In that reality. That's more correct. Okay. And then the altar server or the deacon would come around and then incense the people. Why? Because they're all beautiful? Maybe they're beautiful. But not that, but because they are baptized and they participate in the kingship and the priesthood, and the prophetness of Jesus Christ. And so when they go out in the world as disciples of Jesus Christ, they are called to be His presence in the world. And so we honor that when we incense. Okay? All right, so incense symbolizes divinity. Now you go back to the Magi and you're just like, wow, these three Magi are saying that Jesus Christ is not just a king, not just their king, not just the king, but He's God. All right. All right, let's keep moving. Okay. Myrrh. What is myrrh? Myrrh's a perfume. Myrrh's a beautiful smelling perfume, right? We put it in oils. We put it in oil so that the oil then contains the perfume. And so when you open it up, the perfume, the smell comes out. It's a very pleasing smell. What do we use myrrh for? In the sacraments, we use it for the sacraments where we give a sacrament where there's an indelible seal which cannot be removed. And so myrrh becomes a symbol of something that cannot be removed, right? A symbol of a presence. We use it at baptism. You smell the baby's head after baptism because of the myrrh in the chrism oil that we use, the perfumes. Beautiful. At confirmation, at the ordination of priests, deacons, priests. No, we don't use it for deacons. Do we use it for deacons? I don't remember. Priests and bishops, when they're ordained, are anointed with chrism, right? Okay. But also, if you were to go back to the time of Jesus, it was used to anoint the body when a person had died. So they didn't have embalming the way we do. And so when they would have a vigil, when they would spend time with the body praying, they would bring oils. And the oils were perfumed so that they would release a pleasant aroma when they were in the presence of the body. All right, so you remember the story when they bring Jesus to the tomb, they wanted to bring oils to anoint the body. Okay, so myrrh. So the symbolism is these magi are saying, okay, yes, He's a king, yes, He's divine, but He's also a man. And He's a man who's going to die. And He's a man who's going to die for His people. He's a king who's going to die for His people. He's a God. He is God who's going to die for His people. All three are important, right? Powerful. Now, when Jesus is older, and I'm going to make some connections, we're going to bring this all together. Okay, when Jesus is older and He goes and He's baptized in the Jordan River, He then goes into the desert, right? It's a desert that the Magi crossed from the east. And He goes out into the desert and He encounters another king. Do you remember the king? He is the greatest false king who's ever existed, right? Satan thinks he's a great king. He thinks he's wonderful. And his kingdom, it's just dirt and rocks. He's out there in the desert, right? He's all alone. Satan's all alone. So He's out there. Jesus goes out there to encounter Him, to confront Him, right? Because He's beginning His ministry. So He goes out to this king, right? And you see lots of symbolism, connections between Herod as king and Satan. But anyways, so he goes out to this king. Now, this supposed king, who's just full of lies, presents 3 gifts, if you will, 3 temptations. And each of these temptations, in some ways, is to deny the reality of the 3 gifts, the 3 symbols in the gifts that the Magi brought, as king, as God, and as man. And so these 3 temptations are to tempt Jesus away from the reality of the beauty of those 3 things. So, what was the first temptation when Jesus was in the desert? The first temptation was, hey, you don't need to sacrifice. You don't need to fast. Eat. Come on. Be comfortable. Why are you doing this? Why do you really need to be man? Do you need to suffer as a man? Come on, do your God stuff and turn these rocks into bread and eat, right? Don't sacrifice. Don't think of doing that. Don't die for your people. Don't worry about your people. I'll take care of your people. The first temptation was to reject his humanity, that he is one with us, that he loves us dearly, but that in order to do that, in order to love us dearly, he's going to have to do that. He's going to have to die, right? And so Satan wants to tempt him away from that. And so in our own lives, when we're just consumed with trying to be more comfortable and more, store up more, and to have life just be easier, rather than for it to be more meaningful and to fulfill our mission, then we're slipping into that trap. We're slipping into that temptation. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is he takes him up on top of the temple. Remember, he takes him up to the precipice of the temple and he says, throw yourself down and the angels will catch you. God will catch you. To me, it's almost like he's saying, hey, just do a magic trick, right? Just do a magic trick. Because I think in some ways that violates God's identity as God is love. Every miracle that Jesus did, every magic trick, if you will, that Jesus did was always for the sake of someone else. He never did it for himself. He always did it for others. Everything. There was never just this randomness. There was never the selfishness to it. It was always every miracle was in love. And so this idea of, just do this thing just for the fun of it, it's like betraying that Jesus comes to die for his people, to give his self for his people. And so in some ways it's like denying his divinity. So the attack is on his divinity in that sense. Okay? All right. So he attacked his humanity, attacks his divinity. The last one, he takes him up onto this mountain and he shows him all the kingdoms. And he says, I will give you all these kingdoms. Liar. He doesn't have these kingdoms. Jesus is already king. But he says, I will give you all these kingdoms if you just worship me. Now, what did the Magi do when they came to Jesus? They knelt down, they prostrated themselves, and they adored him. And Satan says, if you just do that to me, I'll give you all of this. He's tempting Jesus away from being the king, because he is the king. This is his reign. This is his kingdom. Satan owns nothing. Okay, really quickly, 2 practical examples where I think we have this battle between the truth and the lie, right, of the gifts and the temptations, and where they conflict. And so I want to get there just real quick. So who are the people who seem to fall into temptation, or who seem to fall prey to the hunter, Satan, more? And how can we, in this moment of strength with the Magi as a team, go out then and try to rescue those who are being beaten up by this hunter, by Satan? And who are the people who seem to fall prey most often to that? And I'm going to argue two. Now, there's more than two, but I'm going to argue two. The first is homeless people. Have you ever wondered why homeless people fall prey to so many different really, really bad sins? I mean, every mortal sin you can think of, and homeless people seem to fall prey to it. And I'm not saying that in judgment of them. I'm saying that because the hunter, Satan, goes after them. Why? Because they're alone. They've been culled. They've been separated from the herd. Sorry to refer to us as a herd, but as sheep, they've been separated, and maybe they wanted to be separated. Maybe they liked the wolves. But anyways, they've been separated, and so they've fallen prey to it. It doesn't take money to reach out to them. We have lots of paths to help homeless people financially and materially, but are we helping them spiritually? Homeless people, and just as I'm saying this, it just came right to my mind right now, people in jail. They're separated, they're alone, and they're often around other people who are separated, who do not have any sense of God in their life, right? But it's the homeless people. You say, how do we reach out to them spiritually? How do we reach out to people in jail spiritually? Okay. The second one is, if I take those, lump them together, the homeless people and people in jail. The second one is the youth, teenagers. Teenagers seem to have this kind of natural, don't bother me with God. I don't believe in God anymore. Don't make me go to Mass. I don't like God. Don't make me pray with the family. I don't even want to eat with the family. Don't make me do family things anymore. Let me just slam my door and just listen to music really loud, and let me isolate myself. Let me be separated from the strength of the herd, and let me fall prey to the hunter. Because look at our teens. Satan loves it when they separate themselves from us. And so in the midst of that, in them separating themselves, they fall prey. And so in falling prey, then I think it calls us, it impels us then to be able to hold firm and say, we're not going to let them do that. We're not going to let them just slip away. We're not going to let them just separate themselves from that which we know to be true, right, and beautiful. Okay? All right. Now, we go back into ordinary time, and in a few weeks, we get ready for Lent. All right, God bless you.